If you have if the school district has a trans student playing on a team, should there be a separate locker room for them or what?
First of all, yes. I mean, if the girls are uncomfortable, and I don't blame them. If I had a daughter, I would want my daughter would be uncomfortable there. So the trans person can obviously use a different area of the locker room, and then everybody's happy.
That was Caitlyn Jenner on Fox and Friends discussing, this hot button trans people in locker rooms, bathrooms, etc., saying that, she would actually support having a. So the question is actually, the host there, Ducey, said, should there be a separate a separate locker room? And then what Caitlyn Jenner says is, well, how about, a separate area of the same locker room? Because I think it would be ridiculous to expect schools to build like an entire additional locker room for what is likely to be very few students. But what Caitlyn Jenner said actually goes to something I think I've said a bunch of times on this show, that I think probably everyone, if you could take the trans issue out of this entirely, I think everyone would probably benefit from and be more comfortable with and enjoy better, just more private areas in locker rooms in general. That can be, changing in front of other people, physical intimidation, bullying, bad things can happen in locker rooms, again, even without the trans issue. So I would be for just having more private areas in locker rooms in general, and then we wouldn't have to have this, very vicious national debate. I don't think there doesn't need to be a law to cover it. You don't need to say, well, here's what the accommodation exactly needs to be. You could just say, well, here's a different. Maybe you turn a corner. Maybe there's a partition or something, or like a bathroom or something where people can go and change, and that would seem to me to be just a no. Everyone can get on board with doing more of that thing without being an attack on anyone's identity or trying to make any specific person uncomfortable, because the whole situation is uncomfortable for everyone pretty much, right? Is that crazy?
Right. I think what's so amazing about this is, first of all, I believe that Fox News is the only cable network that has a full-time trans contributor, which is Caitlyn Jenner, right? That there is an aspect of identity politics that's being very cleverly and I think importantly exploited here. You have people who are conservative who, like we talk about a lot here, are in this case, it seems, representing the sort of very commonsensical average American's view on this, that maybe teenage girls don't want to encounter male genitals in their locker room, but it takes Caitlyn Jenner to be able to say that in a way that hopefully people on the left can hear, whereas she's saying something that, most of the, if not all of the Fox audience is going to agree with. So I think that's a really important thing to point out. That idea that you can be trans and you can say, look, if I had a daughter, she has daughters, so I don't know why she said if I have a daughter, but if I had a daughter, she would be uncomfortable with this. I can imagine a teenager being uncomfortable with this. That is such an obvious point to make, and I think it's great that she was able to make it. I'll make just one more point, which is that there's new polling from Pew about the trans issue. And when you ask Americans, should transgender Americans be protected from discrimination in housing and in the workforce, an overwhelming number of Americans said yes. It's about 64% said yes. They want trans Americans to be protected from discrimination in housing and the workforce. When you ask Americans, should trans women be allowed to compete in women's sports, the number drops to less than 30. Meaning that a huge proportion of Americans want transgender Americans to have legal protections from discrimination, to live in dignity, to be able to have a dignified life, but also are not on board with the more extreme versions of this agenda. And I think that's such an important thing to point out, because Americans are very good people. They do believe in respecting the dignity of all, but you can go too far and you can end up harming the dignity of the vast majority of young girls by forcing them into a situation that makes them uncomfortable, that even many trans people might admit is not the best solution.
Yeah, and just being a teen is awkward and uncomfortable for a lot of people, for cis people, if it's not just trans people. I'm sure it is for trans people, but it's for everyone. So I don't understand why we couldn't just say, let's work to make locker room and bathrooms more comfortable for everyone, and that's call it an anti-bullying kind of initiative, and we don't need separate. You don't have to have a law that forces you to construct an entirely different facility. You don't have to say we need a law that imposes on. There's no right to kind of judge to say, well, maybe this isn't totally appropriate to have this specific person in this specific area. We're going to impose that on you, vis-a-vis the law. That seems like it's just going to make things more uncomfortable for everyone to have, to say this is the trans person has to be in the exact same vicinity, it has to be gawked at by the cis people of that gender. Like, that doesn't seem like who wants to put someone in that position? Let's just afford more dignity, privacy, and comfort to everyone involved. It seems like we can all be on board with that. And that's what I played high school sports. That's what I would have wanted, more privacy in the locker room when I was a kid. So would everyone, right? Like, you're almost weird if you don't. Like, who are the people saying no? Everybody has to be forced to be in the same changing area, and trans people. Like, okay, buddy, if that's your idea, I have some follow-up questions for you. So I don't know. But Jenner's comments came after girls at a high school had claimed that they were banned from their own locker room after objecting to a transgender student using it. One of the students told WCAX-TV that the controversy started then when the trans student made an inappropriate comment as the girls' volleyball team was changing in the locker room. And yeah, that's again, the exact situation you want to avoid, because bad stuff can happen in just unfriendly, uncomfortable situations. So more private changing areas. It sounds perfectly benign solution to this. But but we'll of course continue to follow this very, very important issue for a lot of people that kind of has become now, I think, gender more so than race. Critical race theory was kind of the cultural, school-related thing we were discussing for a while, and I think it's really about gender, the gender issue. So we will be continuing to discuss it every day on the show, and we'll have more Rising for you right after this.